The first time Evan saw Noah cry, it wasn't during a sermon or a confession. It was behind the church, near the cracked fountain that no one ever fixed. The sunlight was falling in thin strips through the old oak trees, and Noah was clutching a worn Bible against his chest, as if it could stop his heart from breaking. That image stayed with Evan. The way Noah tried to hide his tears, the tremor in his voice when he said, "I don't know if God will ever forgive me for what I feel." But Evan wasn't afraid. He was tired of being afraid. He had spent his entire life trying to be the perfect believer, the perfect son, the perfect choir member. Every Sunday, his voice filled the chapel, smooth, clear, angelic. People whispered that he sang like he had heaven in his throat. But what no one knew was that heaven, for him, was Noah. Noah Kim, the boy who played the church piano like it was a confession, who smiled softly even when he was breaking inside. They met during summer choir practice, when the church air smelled like wax and old wood, and the sound of hymns echoed between the walls like ghosts. Evan remembered how Noah had walked in late that day, cheeks flushed, hair slightly damp from the rain outside, and smiled an apology before sitting beside him. That one smile changed everything. From then on, every note Evan sang carried Noah's name in it. At first, they told themselves it was just friendship, a closeness born from shared faith, shared songs, and shared loneliness. But late nights after practice turned into whispered conversations, then laughter, and eventually, silence so charged it could shatter glass. It happened one evening after the rain. The church was empty, the candles still flickering on the altar. Evan had stayed behind to pack up hymn sheets when Noah approached, his steps hesitant. "You sang beautifully today," Noah said softly. Evan smiled. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." Something in Noah's tone made Evan pause. When he looked up, Noah was watching him with an intensity that stole his breath. "You ever wonder," Noah whispered, "why God lets us feel things we're not supposed to?" Evan's hands trembled. Maybe because he knows love isn't the sin. Maybe it's the world that twists it. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air itself stopped moving. Then Noah leaned forward, so close that Evan could see the reflection of candlelight dancing in his pupils. Their lips touched, hesitant at first, like a prayer that might damn them both. And then, like a spark catching flame, it deepened, desperate, trembling, real. When they pulled apart, Noah was crying again. "We can't," he whispered. "Evan, we can't." "I know," Evan said, voice breaking. "But tell me you don't feel it." Noah closed his eyes, his shoulders shaking. "I do. That's the problem." The next Sunday, the sermon was about purity. Pastor Daniel stood on the stage, his voice booming through the microphone, condemning those who defy the sacred order of creation. Evan sat in the choir pew, his throat dry, his palms sweating. Noah sat a few rows down, head bowed. The pastor's words felt like knives, sharp, precise, aimed right at them. After service, their choir director asked Evan to sing a solo for next week's youth event. "You're our example," she said kindly. "You bring people closer to God." If only she knew how far he already felt from him. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every word, every look, every touch. He thought of Noah's hands on the piano, the warmth of his lips, the tears he tried to hide. He picked up his phone, typed out a message, "Meet me tomorrow after rehearsal." When Noah arrived, the church was empty again. The same flickering candles, the same quiet. "I shouldn't have come," Noah said immediately, his voice low. "People are already talking. My mother asked me if I was spending too much time here." "Too much time with you?" Evan stepped closer. "And what did you say?" "That it's not like that." Evan's heart sank. "Isn't it?" Noah looked up, eyes full of anguish. "Evan, you know what they'll do to us. What they'll say. You've seen it before. Remember Daniel Park? They found out about him and his boyfriend. They made him stand on that stage and confess like he'd killed someone." "I'm not Daniel," Evan said. And you're not alone. You don't understand, Noah whispered. My father would disown me. The church would. Would what? Evan's voice cracked. Preach love while burning it alive? For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavier than any sermon. Finally, Noah stepped forward. His hand brushed Evan's sleeve. A tiny, trembling touch. You make it sound so easy, he said. But I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose everything. Evan wanted to tell him he didn't have to lose anything. But the truth was, love like there's always demanded a price. A few weeks later, the rumors started. Someone had seen them together behind the church, too close, too long. Someone else said they'd been holding hands. By the time Pastor Daniel called them into his office, the whispers had already become a storm. Evan, Noah. The pastor's voice was calm, but there was no kindness in it. Do you know why you're here? Evan tried to meet his gaze. Because people are talking. The pastor leaned back. Because people are worried. You both serve in God's house. You both lead worship. And yet your behavior, your closeness, has made others uncomfortable. Noah flinched. Evan could see him shrinking under the weight of shame he didn't deserve. With all due respect, Evan said quietly, we've done nothing wrong. The pastor's eyes narrowed. The church is clear about what is wrong. You know the scripture. Love one another, Evan said before he could stop himself. That's what it says. The pastor slammed his hand on the desk. Don't twist the word to fit your desires, Evan. Noah's breathing quickened. Please, he whispered. Just stop. But Evan didn't. He couldn't. Why is it that when two men love each other, it's sin? But when people lie, cheat, judge, or hate in God's name, no one says a word. The room fell silent. Pastor Daniel looked at him with pity, the kind that cuts deeper than anger. You've lost your way, son. When they left the office, Noah's eyes were wet. You shouldn't have said that. They needed to hear it. They'll make us leave, Evan. Then we'll leave. Noah stopped walking. And go where? Evan didn't have an answer. All he knew was that being away from Noah hurt more than any sermon, any threat, any exile could. That night, Evan walked home under the rain. The city lights blurred behind the drops on his lashes. Every step echoed with questions he couldn't pray away. If love was wrong, why did it feel like the only truth he'd ever known? The next morning, Noah didn't come to rehearsal. Or the next. Evan texted, called, waited outside his apartment, but Noah never answered. Rumor had it that his parents had found out, that they were sending him away to a retreat for spiritual cleansing. Felt like losing sunlight. Evan tried to go on, singing, pretending, surviving, but every hymn felt hollow. Every amen felt like a lie. And then, one afternoon, as he was leaving the church, he heard a familiar sound. Soft piano chords, played with trembling hands. He froze. Noah. Evan froze at the doorway of the church hall, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the music anymore. The sound was unmistakable. Noah's playing, tender and unsteady, like someone trying to remember how to breathe. He followed the notes down the corridor. Each step echoed softly on the wooden floor, carrying him closer to the sound he had been aching for weeks to hear again. When he reached the sanctuary, he stopped. Noah sat at the piano, shoulders hunched, his fingers trembling on the keys. His hair was longer now, curling slightly over his forehead. His eyes were red, as if he'd been crying for days. For a long time, Evan didn't say a word. He just stood there, afraid that if he spoke, Noah would vanish again. Then, quietly, he whispered, "You came back." Noah's hands stilled on the keys. The last note hung in the air, lonely, unresolved. He didn't turn around. "I shouldn't have." Evan took a few steps closer. "Then why did you?" Noah laughed softly, a tired, broken sound. "Because I couldn't stay away." He finally turned to face him. The candlelight caught the wet sheen in his eyes. They said I could come back to play as long as I promised to stay away from you. Evan's stomach twisted. And you agreed? Noah nodded, his voice barely a whisper. It was the only way they'd let me back. A long silence filled the room. Evan walked to the front pew and sat down, watching Noah from a few feet away. You really think we can just go back to pretending? Noah's fingers pressed lightly on the piano keys, not enough to make sound. I don't know. I can't lose my family. Evan, my father said if I ever fall again, he'll throw me out. He meant it. Evan swallowed hard. And what about what you want? Noah looked down. What I want doesn't matter. It does to me. Noah's breath hitched. You don't get it. You've always been braver than me. You can stand there and fight the world, but I was raised to kneel to it. Evan moved closer, the space between them shrinking until he could see the tiny scar under Noah's left eye, the one he got from climbing the church fence as a kid. Then let me fight for you. Noah shook his head, stepping back. If you do, they'll destroy you too. Then we'll be destroyed together. The words came out fierce, trembling with the kind of love that knew no safety. Noah looked at him like he wanted to believe it, like every part of him was screaming to, but years of fear were hard to unlearn. He turned back to the piano and began to play again, softly, almost mechanically. Evan recognized the melody, Amazing Grace, only this time the grace felt miles away. Later that week, the church announced a new initiative, Reclaiming the Lost, a month of purity. It was plastered across posters, social media, and even the bulletin board by the choir room. First, Evan ignored it. But then he heard the whispers, how the program was designed for members who had strayed, how it would begin with testimonies of those who had repented, and then he saw Noah's name on the volunteer list. When he found him after rehearsal, Noah was packing up sheet music, avoiding eye contact. You signed up. Evan's voice trembled between disbelief and anger. I didn't have a choice, Noah said quietly. Pastor Daniel asked me personally. He said it would be good for people to see me renew my commitment. Commitment to what? To God. Evan stepped forward. Or to pretending you're someone you're not? Noah's lips parted, but no sound came out. He looked so fragile, like a single wrong word would make him shatter. Evan, he finally whispered, I don't know what else to do. Every day I wake up scared. I keep thinking maybe if I just follow what they tell me, it'll go away. It won't. I know, Noah said, tears glistening. But I can't keep fighting everyone. I'm tired. Evan's chest ached. He wanted to hold him, to tell him it was okay to be tired, to be scared. But before he could move, the choir door opened, and Pastor Daniel walked in. The pastor's eyes flicked between them. Everything all right here? Evan forced a smile. Yes, sir. Just finishing up. Good, Daniel said, his tone pleasant but edged with something sharp. Noah, don't forget our meeting tomorrow. We'll discuss your testimony. Evan felt his pulse quicken. Testimony. The word tasted like ash. When the pastor left, Noah's shoulders sagged. See? I can't risk defying him again. Not now. Evan reached out, gripping Noah's wrist gently. Then let me stand beside you when you speak. Let them see that love doesn't need permission. Noah stared at him for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing on both of them. You'd really do that? Evan nodded. For you, I'd do anything. The night of the testimony came faster than either of them expected. The church was packed. Families, elders, youth members, everyone had come to witness the month of purity opening night. Evan sat near the front, hands cold, heart racing. He could feel the judgment already in the air, thick, invisible, suffocating. When Noah walked onto the stage, the room fell quiet. He wore a white shirt and black slacks, his usual choir uniform, but his eyes looked hollow. Pastor Daniel stood beside him, smiling warmly at the crowd. Tonight, one of our beloved members wishes to share his journey, how he's found his way back to God. The microphone was handed to Noah. He hesitated. For a moment he just stood there, fingers trembling at his sides. Then he began. "I grew up in this church," he said softly. "I learned what love meant here, what faith meant. I was told that if I followed God, I'd always be accepted." A murmur of approval rippled through the audience. But Noah's voice faltered. "But I also learned that love can make people turn away from you, that sometimes what you feel can be called sin, even if it's the only thing that ever felt pure." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Pastor Daniel frowned. Noah continued, his voice growing steadier. "I was told to pray harder, to fight it, to hate it, but every prayer just made me hate myself instead." The pastor stepped forward, whispering something, but Noah shook his head and stepped back. "I can't do this anymore," he said louder now. "I can't stand here and say I'm sorry for loving someone who taught me kindness, who taught me courage, who taught me what faith and love really means." A gasp went through the room. Evan felt the world slow. Every muscle in his body screamed to move, so he did. He stood up and walked down the aisle toward the stage. The whispers followed him like shadows. When he reached the steps, Noah turned to him, tears streaming down his cheeks. And without a word, Evan took his hand. The silence was deafening. Pastor Daniel's face went pale. "Evan, let go." Evan looked at the pastor, then at the crowd, and finally at Noah. "No." He turned back to the congregation. "You preach love every Sunday. You say we're all children of God. So why do you make us choose between him and being ourselves?" An elderly woman in the front row crossed herself. Someone else whispered, "Blasphemy." But Evan didn't stop. His voice shook, but it carried through the hall. "I've spent my whole life trying to be the person this church wanted me to be. Obedient, faithful, perfect. But what's the point of worshiping love if you're afraid to live it?" Noah squeezed his hand. The tears on his face were no longer of shame, but release. "God didn't teach me hate," Evan continued. "You did, and I'm done learning it." The pastor's voice rose in anger. "That's enough." But Evan kept speaking, his eyes locked on Noah's. "If this is what being lost looks like, then maybe heaven isn't up there after all. Maybe it's right here." And then, in front of everyone, he kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or showy. It was simple, honest. Two people claiming what the world kept trying to take. Gasps filled the room. Someone shouted. The pastor's voice thundered, but Evan didn't hear it anymore. All he could feel was Noah, trembling, crying, holding on to him like a lifeline. When they finally broke apart, Noah whispered, "You just burned every bridge." Evan smiled faintly. "Then let's build a new one." They were told to leave the church that night. No one stopped them. No one helped either. Outside, the air was cold, the streetlights flickering. The church bells rang behind them, echoing like the last heartbeat of a life they'd just buried. For a while, they walked in silence. Finally, Noah spoke. "I don't know what happens now." Evan looked up at the sky, stars faint behind city haze. "Maybe we start over, somewhere people don't need saving just for being who they are." Noah laughed softly, wiping his tears. "That place doesn't exist. Then we'll make it." They ended up at the cracked fountain behind the church, the same one where Noah had cried that first day, the same one where it had all begun. Evan sat on the edge, the stone cold under his hands. "You ever wonder," he said quietly, "if God's watching us right now?" Noah smiled faintly. "If he is, I hope he's smiling too." They sat there for a long time, not saying anything else. The night air was still, the only sound the soft trickle of water. For the first time in a long time, Evan felt peace, fragile, fleeting, but real. He reached out and took Noah's hand again, their fingers intertwined, warm and steady. Noah rested his head on Evan's shoulder. "I was so afraid," he whispered. But when you walked up there, it felt like something finally broke free. Evan nodded. Me too. Do you think we'll be okay? Evan looked at him, his chest tightening with love. Maybe not right away, but someday. And in that quiet corner of the world, where faith and fear had once collided, they found something neither of them had expected. Not salvation, not forgiveness, but grace. In the weeks that followed, they built a small life outside the church's reach. Noah gave piano lessons at a community center downtown. Evan sang at a local cafe on Fridays, his voice no longer hidden behind hymns. Sometimes people from the old church would pass by. Some looked away, others smiled softly, like maybe they were starting to understand. One evening, after a long day, Noah found Evan sitting by the window, strumming a guitar. "What are you thinking about?" Noah asked. Evan looked up with a small smile. "About how heaven never really left us. It just changed its address." Noah laughed and leaned down to kiss him, slow and tender. Outside, the church bells rang again, distant, faint, but no longer heavy. This time they sounded like freedom. 10 years had passed since the night they walked out of the church. 10 years since the bells had rung behind them like a final goodbye. The world had changed in quiet, uneven ways. The town had built a new youth center. The old church had new pastors, and the faces that once turned away from them now nodded politely in grocery store aisles. Some things healed slowly, others never did. But for Evan Lee and Noah Kim, life had grown in unexpected directions, like wildflowers in cracks of concrete. It was Sunday morning, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of a small community chapel by the coast. Not the one they'd been cast out of, this one was different. The walls were pale blue, the pews mismatched, the air filled with the faint scent of sea salt and old wood. At the front, Noah sat at a piano, fingers gliding effortlessly across the keys. He played not for penance, not for approval, but for joy. His music carried laughter now, something that once felt impossible. Evan stood near the back, humming along, his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a young boy, their adopted son, Jiho. The boy was 8, small and curious, with bright eyes that sparkled every time he heard music. "Papa," Jiho whispered, "why does Daddy always smile when he plays?" Evan smiled softly. "Because there was a time he thought he'd never play again." Jiho frowned thoughtfully. "Did someone take his piano away?" Evan knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Not exactly. But sometimes people try to take away the things that make you happy, and the people you love. When that happens, you just have to keep believing you'll find your way back." The boy nodded solemnly, as if he understood something deeper than his years. "Like faith. Exactly like faith." After the service, small, informal, filled with laughter instead of judgment, Noah joined them near the door. The sunlight hit his face just right, catching the faint scar under his eye, the one Evan still traced with his thumb when he couldn't sleep. "Your student said you played like an angel today," Evan teased. Noah chuckled. "You say that every week. Because it's always true." Jiho tugged Noah's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go to the beach now?" "In a minute, bud." Noah looked up at Evan, his expression softening. "You remember when we couldn't even stand in a church without shaking?" Evan smiled faintly. "Now look at us. 2 sinners with a son and a Sunday schedule." Noah laughed. "Guess heaven really did come closer after all." That afternoon, they went to the beach like they always did. The ocean was calm, the horizon endless. Jiho ran along the shore, chasing waves and collecting shells. Evan and Noah sat on the sand, shoulders touching, the same way they had a decade ago by that cracked fountain. Except now, the world around them no longer felt like an enemy. For a long time, neither spoke. The sound of waves filled the spaces between their breaths. Then Noah said quietly, "Do you ever miss it? The old church?" Evan thought for a moment. "Sometimes. Not the rules, not the fear, just the music. The way it felt when everyone sang together. Noah nodded. Yeah, me too. Evan reached over, brushing a grain of sand from Noah's hand. But maybe what we have now is closer to what faith was supposed to be. No fear, no shame, just love. Noah smiled. You always did turn everything into poetry. You married a singer, Evan said with a wink. It's a package deal. They both laughed, quiet and content. Jiho came running back, holding something in his tiny hand. Look, 2 seashells that fit together. He held them out, one pale pink, one deep gray, curved so perfectly they formed a single spiral when pressed together. Evan took them, heart aching in the best way. That's beautiful, he said. You found a match. Jiho grinned. They belong together. Noah met Evan's gaze. Yeah, he said softly. They do.